Yeah,
I heard you say 6.
I'm just
oh no,
curious.
I'm like, but I am like,
So the
you can come anytime you want.
Just not till Friday at the earliest.
Each night I'm like, just can I tonight? Like I get kind of excited.
I'll open it. I'll open it, but I'll ask.
Yeah, no, he hasn't.
I was thinking in my head, if you just send a
Fine.
picture of
I'm
it
like,
10
come on.
times quicker than explaining why you didn't send a picture.
We don't need to go to June.
All right, with it being right at 7 o'clock, let's get started here. Jolene, can you do a roll call?
Councilmember Erickson.
Here.
Councilmember Larson.
Here.
Councilmember Valento.
Here.
Councilmember Miller.
Here.
And Mayor Roberts.
Here. All right, if you're able, please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, council, we have a agenda in front of us. Is anyone interested in making a motion to approve?
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, there was an amendment to the agenda. What's in front of you is the amended agenda. We are adding a closed session to the agenda, and that is reflected in the paper copy that's in front of you. So if we would have a motion to approve the agenda, if we could include that change. And then I would just add that while they're not new agenda items, we would just add that there are two handouts that go along with the agenda packet. So one is the sale day report from Ehlers, our consultant on the bond issue, and that's just something that's new today. And then also the administrator's report, which was noted in the agenda as a handout that would be coming. So both of those are new items to the agenda, but not necessarily an amended part of the agenda.
Okay. All right, with that,
Also move to approve the amended agenda.
I'll second.
second, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next item is open forum. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak. Any city-related business, please limit it to 3 minutes. Is there anyone interested in speaking tonight?
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe anyone has signed up this evening. I'm just taking a gamble on that.
All right, everyone's enjoying the nice evening out there today. Great. Okay, with that, then, we'll move on to item 6, and looking for the approval of the consent agenda. A motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion, is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. Our first regular item, 7A Median Refresh Project, and Dave, looks like you're going to walk us through this.
I'd give you a good introduction, but Lucius has the introduction built into his PowerPoint, so
Great.
you're all familiar with Lucius. He's been here a number of times, so he's gonna give you a presentation on our median refresh project.
Thanks, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, council members. We've been working on the median refresh concept and project. I put the timeline in here just to remember kind of where we've come from and where we're headed on this project, and just give some updates since our last council workshop. So we are looking at several of the landscape medians on Broadway from 19th Street to the Lake Street roundabout, and just considering what we can do to refresh those medians, what we want to put into it, and kind of the objectives of doing that refresh for the landscape. And so starting back in September of 2024, we started going through some workshops to just kind of start the design process, figure out what we really wanted to do, if we wanted to just redo what was originally there, if we wanted to minimize the landscaping and the maintenance effort, or if we wanted to just take everything out and just kind of go to a concrete, low-maintenance solution. That was not the preferred option, so we kind of met in the middle and decided to concentrate the refresh on isolated portions of it, keeping the intent of the landscape, and just trying to find that balance between the aesthetics of the landscape and the maintenance moving into the future. And so as we went to October, we modified the design to meet in the middle with that, and we started looking at the installation and maintenance costs around just this landscape median portion of the project. And in November, we finalized kind of our design proposal, the palette of the plants, reviewed the costs, and we moved forward with some design renderings and estimates, kind of to get to a point where we could go to final design. And one of the requests was to meet with the beautification committee to kind of review the planting plan and solicit some of the feedback from their perspectives and experience in the gardening and landscape. And so we met a couple weeks ago, and we had done some renderings for the project, and we shared those with the committee, and I put them in here too, since we didn't formally look at these in any of the workshops. But this is just a photo of the existing landscape on 19th Street and Broadway, kind of existing, and then when I toggle forward, kind of implementing some of those improvements, removing some of the landscape, replacing it with some concrete, keeping kind of the original plantings, and just refreshing the median and the boulevards between curb and sidewalk. And we also did two renderings at the Lake Street roundabout, just going from the existing to the proposed. Very subtle. If you toggle back and forth, you can see some of the landscape areas in kind of the keys for the crosswalks around the roundabout. Go to concrete. Currently, they're wood mulch. Just decided not to do plantings there for sight lines and safety. And then third rendering packs even more into it, because part of the concept was expanding parking area. And so on the right-hand side, you can see the grassed area, city-owned property. And when we go to the proposed, kind of moving a new raised bed planter, and then adding that parking lot and some sidewalk, and again, taking out some of the landscape to some concrete. And so when we shared that, we also discussed the plant selection for the project. These are 3 plants from all of the original plans, the landscape medians that are the survivors that have done the best. And so we opted for these in kind of a block planting strategy of these 3 plants, but considering their heights, from like a low height to a medium height to a taller height of plants, and making sure that our planting plan, we keep those high plants out of like the site triangle of the intersections, just to maintain and improve some of the visibility in those areas. And going into the kind of the cadence of the plants, starting kind of low, medium, high, medium, low, and kind of keep up and down as you go down Broadway. So, you know, most people probably won't even notice it, but there will be kind of a rhythm or a cadence to the planting as you go down Broadway. And then looking at the tree species as well, again, these are original plants except for the Black Hills spruce. Originally in the roundabout on Lake Street was Colorado blue spruce. We've learned that those trees after about 20 years thin out, just as a general landscape practice. And Black Hills spruce is a native, very similar shape, just not quite that blue tinge, but it's still the same spruce tree. And when we reviewed this with the beautification committee, they liked all the plant selections. They just iterated that the daylily be an improved Stella cultivar, just known for its hardiness and kind of compactness in the landscape plan. And then we also talked about the autumn blaze maple trees. All maples have surface rooting where they come up and out of the ground and kind of expose. And so there was some concern, like, is that going to be a maintenance concern for pavements in the future, sidewalk, curbs, things like that. Again, these trees were planted with the original plan 15 years ago, and so that has not been an issue so far for those trees that are still there and surviving. So we felt pretty confident that we could go with the autumn blaze again. Now with the Black Hill spruce, plants, invasive bugs, diseases is always a moving target. And so Black Hill spruce, while more hardy than the Colorado blue, now has a new insect that's kind of starting to eat at the buds on those trees. And so the committee identified that as a concern or something to look at. And 2 other species that are have not had that insect issue yet is this concolor fir, which gets back to that bluish tinge, or a white spruce. All of them are evergreen and kind of that pyramidal shape. So just really getting into the details, thinking about that long-term survivability. So we can still make that choice. We haven't finalized the design yet, but good feedback to have. And so we looked at going forward into actually implementing the project, getting to construction. And this was information we had in our second and third workshop, where we've identified kind of each one of those intersections as its own phase, and we put construction costs to it, and we also added the maintenance cost. Whether we did break out maintenance costs that's already accounted for versus new maintenance costs that would be added, just to make sure that we're maintaining the landscape and not ending up back here where we are, where it's kind of a depleted landscape after 15 years. And so Dave and I have some bets going on about how true these estimates are. He thinks I'm estimating high, I'm being conservative. I'd rather surprise everybody when we come in below budget. But we'll find out as we put our timeline together. With those costs, those conservative costs, we're kind of eyeballing a 3 or 4 year plan, doing one intersection at a time in phases, starting with 19th Street this year in 2025. And so in addition to the construction costs, put together budgets for 3 tasks to finalize the construction plans, because right now we put together one massive design package. And if we're gonna split that apart into phases, we'd have to break those drawings apart and put our quotes together to go get quotes and do that. And we also included some optional construction administration for kind of select key points, not necessarily 24/7 standing over the crew doing the landscape, kind of working, partnering with Public Works to monitor that, but kind of these key areas where we've had issues before, where bad stock comes from the nursery and then you're fighting about getting a replacement. So we'll just go to the nursery and do a pre-inspection to make sure we're getting shapely trees, things that we wouldn't reject, just try to make it smoother for everybody, so we have less fighting with contractors on the fly. We can kind of head off some of those issues. And so tonight, just looking to get approval of the kind of the construction timeline and the budget, make sure that fits the scope of what the city wants to take on and when, and then just approval to finalize the construction plans and bid phase 1 for 2025. Any questions?
Great, thank you for that. Council, any thoughts or questions?
I don't have any questions about the project. It's something that we've spent a lot of hours on as a collective group and workshops, and so I appreciate, you following up with the beautification committee and getting their input on that. I think that was important. I mean, this is our main entrance, one of the main entrances to Forest Lake. I think it's something we need to move forward with.
I just have a couple questions. On there, I believe, we're filling the concrete area. Is that going to be colored concrete? Because right now, the county's in the process of removing colored concrete, correct, on the outside of each side of Broadway?
So they haven't had any issues with the concrete in the medians. It's all on the outside. So as they were doing the crosswalks, they just figured they would remove the rest of it as they're removing the panels, but they didn't see any cracking or any issues of that concrete in the center. Probably mainly because no one's driving on it, or it's not getting used. So I think saving what we have and adding that colored concrete versus trying to rip it all out, I mean, you're going to double your cost back that way. So the trickiest part is going to get the closest color match to it. So the 19th Street one is we're going to have to do some palettes to try to get that close match, and then at least we'll have that color. They used 2 different colors when they did Broadway, so you have to kind of figure out which that color is.
Okay. I noticed, and this is somewhat, it's not related, but somewhat related, that someone struck the blue fence at 35 there.
Yep.
And so what's the plan?
So we filed a claim with the insurance company, so we're just waiting to hear back from them, and we'll get a contractor to fix it. We're just, the league and our insurance rep are working through that right now, so.
Okay.
But all the fence work is covered all the way down Broadway and Lake, part of our insurance.
And then is there, obviously the plan is to continue to maintain these areas that aren't going to be approached this year, maybe next year, the plan there, you have people in line to keep,
Yep.
maintain as much as possible.
Right now, we can't get in there because of the construction. It's just suicide trying to go out there and walk around, but I mean, the plan will be to, once we get seasonal staff, to try to get out there as soon as they're done out there working. It still sounds like they'll be done beginning of June, so then we'll get out there, we'll have our staff, they start coming back. Starting next week, we'll probably have 15 of them by that time, so we're using all of our people just to mow right now and keep up with mowing, so it's kind of tight timing, but like even on this, just the ones that we end up redoing, you know, Kevin Warner and staff have looked at that, what it's gonna take for time. It's a cost, but some of that's labor cost, right? But some of it's fertilizer and aeration and irrigation maintenance and all that. So I mean, it's a lot more thought out and will be planned in to keep this maintained versus installing it 15 years ago and then no one had a plan to take care of it. I think that was the detriment to this. It's 15 years old too, one thing, but it's also, I don't think there was ever a plan to take care of it once it went in.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might add, you know, Dave and I have had a lot of talks in my first couple months here just about that general change in philosophy, right? That whatever we're investing in, we want to make sure that there's an immediate plan, whether it's a new public works building, day one, we gotta have a plan as to how we're taking care of that. I think Dave's been on that track before I got here, it wasn't my idea. But I just want to reiterate that I do feel very comfortable with how Dave and his crew have mapped that out, so.
Yeah, so to Councilmember Erickson's point, you know, this is the entrance to the city, one of our main streets. This is not inexpensive, but a lot of that is concrete replacement, which is gonna save in maintenance, to that point, maintenance going forward. So if there's no other questions with that, I would entertain a motion to approve. Looks like we have a couple. Are there 3 different motions that we're looking for? Or
I didn't know what you guys were gonna think about doing, so I broke out all 3 of his tasks into separate motions, so unfortunately now you have to do that, do all 3 of them. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, you could actually make a motion to approve staff recommendations and not have to go through the whole rigmarole if you choose.
Okay.
I like that. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the median refresh project as recommended by staff and presented tonight.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great. Thanks for your work on this.
Thank you. It was fun.
All right, 7B, public hearing, Hidden Creek vacation. Abby.
Thank you, Mayor Roberts, members of the council. As I noted in, is it coming up? Oh, wait. That's okay, I could have done it too. As I noted in my staff report, when the city approved Hidden Creek 3rd Edition, we inadvertently forgot about some of the vacations that need to occur before the plat can be recorded. So as a reminder, vacation isn't that fun one, but it's the giving away of public land or releasing of some public obligations. So I'll run through this really quick. This is the Hidden Creek 3rd Edition. It's that upper northwest corner of Hidden Creek. There's 2 areas on the underlying Hidden Creek plat. One is the cul-de-sac on Enfield Avenue, and then the other one is the platted drainage and utility easement over Outlot C. As you'll see in the plans here, Enfield Avenue will keep carrying all the way up and connect up with that Hidden Creek 2nd Edition and the neighborhoods to the north. We no longer need that cul-de-sac. And then that outlot is just getting replatted, but the drainage and utility easement associated with that is going to go away because it's being developed as a storm pond that would be dedicated to the city. So tonight before you is the vacation of Enfield Avenue North and that drainage and utility easement of Hidden Creek of Outlot C. So in order for the council to consider vacating public land and releasing of that kind of public ownership, you have to hold a public hearing after notice to affected property owners. We have not received any public comments to date. Then you really need to find that there's no public need for these, for the land that we're vacating. As I noted, that cul-de-sacs, the roadway is going to extend through, and then eventually, once those storm ponds are developed, Outlet C will end up becoming property of the city of Forest Lake. So staff does find that there's no public benefit in keeping these properties and those public encumbrances, and would recommend that you move to adopt the enclosed resolutions. Again, there's, I think, maybe 2 recommendations, but you can, as Jolene noted, make it really easy and move to approve the recommendations from staff. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay, with that, at 7:21, we're going to open up the public hearing on this issue of the Hidden Creek vacation. Is there anyone here to speak to this issue? One more time, anyone here to speak to this issue? With that, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Motion is a second.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Public hearing is closed. All right, so let's bring this back to council. Just any questions, any thoughts on this?
It makes a lot of sense to do. So if it's all right with you, I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 512-2502, resolution vacating a part of a right-of-way located between the Hidden Creek development located in the city of Forest Lake, Minnesota, and resolution number 512-2503. Do we need a second? Do we need to do those separately?
She said you can do
No,
them both.
I think you can do them together, that's fine.
Okay. 512-2503, resolution vacating a public drainage and utility easement located within the Hidden Creek development located in the city of Forest Lake, Minnesota.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, 7C, ordinance 753. This is related to military honors and guns, I guess, in the city. I don't know.
Yep, Captain Hanegraaff is not here today, so I'm taking this one.
Okay,
on,
chief,
so.
great.
Good evening, and yes, what I have for you is an amendment to our current city ordinance pertaining to use and possession of firearms or other weapons. And as you know, earlier in the year, we realized that our current ordinance did not allow military honor guards or color guards to take part in military honors where they could fire blank ammunition from their weapons to provide like a 3-volley salute. So what we did is staff scheduled a meeting with the representatives of American Legion, VFW, and our 2 local funeral homes to discuss the ordinance, the limitations in the current ordinance, and give them an opportunity for feedback. And we had a great meeting. It was long, but it was very, it was good. We got a lot of great input from them. They learned a lot about the current ordinance and why it needed to be updated. So attached is an amendment to our current ordinance that was approved by all the stakeholders and reviewed by our city attorney. And I definitely want to publicly thank the American Legion, the VFW, Matson's Funeral Home, and Robert's Funeral Home for their input in regards to this amended ordinance. So staff recommends the City Council approve Ordinance 753, amending Title 13, Chapter 130, General Offenses, and there's just one there.
All right. Thanks, Chief. Any questions on this one, council, at all? Yeah, this was we found out kind of the hard way that we didn't, wasn't aligned with federal law, so I appreciate everyone's work on this, Luke's and yours, Chief, and the 2 vets organizations. So with that, is anyone interested in making a motion on this?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 753, an ordinance amending Forest Lake City Code Title 13, Chapter 130, General Offenses.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving right along. 7D, Resolution 05122401, awarding sale of $4.4 million general obligation for street reconstruction bonds. And Mark?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, have some good news to share with you. And I'll let Dan get into this a bit more here, but just in very general terms, the sale of the bond that happened today came in at more than 0.5% lower than we were anticipating, and that translates into, I think you'll tell us about $300,000 in savings over the life of the bond. So again, a bond sale is much like a bid that we put out for construction. Instead of contractors bidding, it's banks. Instead of a construction project, it's a bond or a loan. And so Ehlers is our equivalent to Bolton & Mink. They're the consultant putting that bond out there for bid, and we'll just turn it over to Dan at this point.
Welcome, thanks.
Well, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. By way of introduction, my name is Dan Tinter. I'm municipal advisor with Ehlers and Associates, and you may recall that we talked about this about a month and a half ago on March 24th when you approved the street reconstruction plan after you held a public hearing. We had to work our way through a reverse referendum period, and then ultimately, as the city administrator mentioned earlier today at your request and on your behalf, Ehlers solicited bids from qualified banks and underwriters on the bonds that were offered and contemplated under those plans. We actually received ultimately 8 bids, which is a little higher than what we would usually anticipate. We would hope to be in the 3 to 5 range. So 8 demonstrates to us that it was a good test of the market. There was a lot of strong interest in the city's AA+ rated bonds. As mentioned, the low bid actually came from FHN Financial Capital Markets of Memphis, Tennessee. And you may think to yourself, Memphis, Tennessee, what is that all about? But it's not uncommon for highly rated government debt to be purchased by banks and underwriters really across the country. And so we do see from time to time that we will have a state that you may not think of purchase debt ultimately because they have investors and clients that are interested in these bonds for their portfolios either on an individual or commercial basis. Among those 8 bids, the high bid was just over 4%, so that's a fairly tight spread, and that's generally what we'd like to see when we have a number of bids. That also indicates to us that it was really a good test of the market today because we weren't seeing that there were really that many outliers, that everyone was in a pretty tight range across the 8 bidders. Ultimately, as a part of the process, the city did receive a reoffering premium on the bonds, which is just a premium is ultimately them asking you to maintain a certain coupon rate, and that pushes the yields on the bonds down, so it ultimately doesn't affect your interest rate. After talking with staff earlier today, and I think consistent with your past practice, staff ultimately opted to use that premium to reduce the size of the bond. So to the city administrator's point earlier, you actually got an interest rate that was a little lower than what we were anticipating, and then you got a little extra money in the bid process that actually allowed you to reduce the overall size of the bond. So in the award resolution that was circulated by Bond Council, you may actually see that it calls for a principal amount of $4,145,000, which is lower than the pre-sale amount that was discussed. So that's another thing to indicate that it was a good sale. You got a lower interest rate than you're hoping for, and you're borrowing a little less than you thought you were. So ultimately, when those things come into alignment, we feel good about the sale. At this point in time, if the council thought it was in order, you could certainly adopt the resolution. Upon adoption, we would then begin the closing process for the bonds. You can think of your action tonight as something like signing a purchase agreement, and then about 3 weeks from now is when we'd actually close on the bonds. A number of documents would be circulated, and then the money would ultimately be wired to the city, and then it would be available for draw requests on the project. So after your action here tonight, there's still a little more work to do to get everything finalized before the city can ultimately possess the bond proceeds. So that's an overview of a few of the moving parts. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council has about the process to date, the bids, or the next steps in the process.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just have Dan answer a couple of, I'll just sort of call them softball questions, but Can you just speak to whether or not there's a call date on any of this bond? In other words, can we pay this off early?
Your Honor, members of the council, I would note on the second page of the sale day report that was provided that summarizes all the actions earlier this evening, you will note under the notes section below the table that the bonds maturing as of February 1st, 2036 and thereafter are callable as of February 1st, 2035. So ultimately, as of 2035, you could call the bonds, meaning you could refund them or pay them off, and that would be for any maturities that occur after February 1st, on or after February 1st, 2036. So essentially, you are locked out from paying off the bonds until those dates.
Just to clarify why we do that, if you had a call date of every year and just kept that open, you wouldn't have gotten nearly as good a interest rate, right? So when someone knows they've got something locked in like this, you get a much better interest rate. So that's a calculated question we ask ourselves before we issue this is, should there be a call date halfway through? Well, maybe we'd like to pay it off early, you know, if something happened where we came into some money or something, but then you risk having a higher interest rate. So we opted not to have that call date in there. Just wanted to clarify why that is. And then the other thing I just wanted to highlight, and this is just purely for bragging rights, but with this bond, we did a rating call and a rating reassessment, and we're very happy to report that we maintained our AA+ rating. So that's just excellent news. Again, that speaks to why you got such good numbers here, and that's why you're going to continue. That's just overall very good news for you as you look to do any other bonding in the future, is that the markets think that, and S&P thinks we're a very good, sound investment for investors. So that's a slap on the back to everybody, including the council, for running a good city. And you know, I think some of the things that were in the report, you know, speak to things that should be important to us all. And I hope if you didn't have a chance to read that, you would take some time, just because there's a lot of things in there that you might not think about. But you know, Jessica, your interim finance director, and I were on a ratings call, and you know, the questions they ask are around the stability of government. How much do you have in reserves? You know, do you have a policy? Are you following that policy? So there's a lot of things that you might see us as staff guiding you on in regards to those decisions. And there's a reason we're guiding you in that. That's because the markets like to see that kind of thing. They like to see stability. They like to see that you're saving money, that you have a policy, and that you're sticking to it, and all that kind of stuff. Not overextending yourself, all those type of things. So those are all important in keeping us with that good rating and able to get this, call it cheap money. We're getting a very good rate here. So that's because of that AA+ rating. So
Yeah, that's great. Great news. Any questions of either Dan or Mark on this?
So the only question would be, are we awarding a sale of 4.4 or 4.145?
Your Honor, members of the council, for the reduced amount
Okay.
to reflect the premium that the city received earlier today.
Got it.
Okay, anyone interested in making a motion?
Make a motion that we approve resolution 512-2401, awarding the sale of $4.145 million in general obligation street reconstruction bonds.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for the information on this and presenting this, and Mark for educating us a little bit on why we're doing some of these things. So it's all great news.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. We appreciate you working with Ellers on your bond issues, and congratulations on the great sale.
Yeah, thank you.
Best of luck with the project. Thank you.
All right, we have just a couple of discussion items here this evening. Just as a reminder, these are discussion items. There will be no action taken tonight, but likely something, action further in future meetings. First item is grading escrows and fee schedule adjustment. Abby.
Yeah, thank you. So as I noted in my staff report to you, we started analysis during the 2024 construction season. There's a couple catalysts for us, a combination of a rise in drainage complaints, and then when Corey Murphy, our former building official, left, we really just started to look at some of the grading and drainage issues we were having within the community and trying to get a better understanding of what was some of the causes to see if we needed to look at some of our policies, procedures, codes, those sorts of things to maybe start preventing some of these problems. And what we did find is there are a number of city code sections, engineering standards, processes, procedures that exist to kind of create this, just let's throw it all in a box and shake it up, and then we got problems, right? And so tonight, the idea is to introduce you to those issues, kind of identify some of the opportunities that we have for improvement, and then kind of seek some of the policy direction associated with our grading and drainage complaints. So as I noted, there's 4 different sections that I outlined in the staff report. The city code requirements, so that's true city law. The engineering standards is generally how we're designing things. Our administrative procedures, and then financial implications, fees and escrows. So when it comes to our city code requirements, one of the biggest things that we had learned is not all of our land disturbing activities were having their grading and drainage reviewed. Generally speaking, when a new home was coming in, certainly our commercial construction, because we go through that site plan review process, but a lot of major additions, major landscaping projects, retaining walls, pools, a number of those types of projects just weren't addressing the drainage on the property, how this is going to affect the property and those around it. We also didn't have any sort of base requirements for what would be required in a grading plan. And then we didn't often require an as-built, just proof that you actually graded your property to how you said you were going to grade your property. And then, you know, we didn't do things like withholding our inspections or withholding back escrow funds. And so, you know, the foundation of kind of some of the things that we're doing just aren't embedded in our city codes. So what we would recommend is that we do require grading plans for all new structures, major additions, major impervious surface additions, certainly significantly sized patios, pools, those sorts of things, or landscaping that could, you know, where we might have some engineered components and such. Really starting to look at how's that affecting, maybe not the subject property, but are we sure we're not affecting the properties around that subject property? Establishing some of those base requirements, you know, just simple things like what kind of elevations do you show? Do you 5-foot contours, 2-foot contours? This starts to get a little technical for even me, but having some of those base standards established, I think we all would recommend, staff would recommend, and then requiring as-built plans. When land has been disturbed, and if we've required a grading plan, making sure that we have proof that they actually followed that grading plan, certainly before we would release funds or conduct inspections. I'm gonna get to all these as like bullet points as discussion, and so we can kind of vet through these. Is that all right, or do you wanna kind of talk through them as we go?
That's fine.
Okay. Engineering standards, what we've really found is that we're reacting instead of preventing. Like, that's just plain and simple. We're seeing the rise in drainage complaints largely because our lot sizes are getting smaller, our setbacks are being reduced. We're working in areas of high clay soil, and anytime you kind of put those things together and get the slightest bit of workmanship issues, we're gonna run into some challenges. We also have some pretty, I don't want to say steep, not steep, side and rear yard standards. And so they're really not well aligned with the industry or allow for any tolerance. Very kind of flat is what we've been asking people to build towards, where we might need to maybe pitch our yards a little, not a ton, we're talking about 0.5%, but doing that in a way that then there is some tolerance, trying to get water moving down properties through the back of properties. And then also driveway grades. We allow for some pretty steep driveway grades. Just anytime you're kind of moving those driveways closer to the roadway, you've got them at a steeper grade, you're gonna have that water shed down, and without places to go, we're gonna end up with pooling and drainage issues. So what we found with the engineering standards is that we just really need to better align them kind of those industry standards, right? Kind of looking at what other communities do and making some recommendations of getting the water flowing a little bit better. Administrative processes, as I note in the presentation here, there's no City Hall staff that's skilled to review grading plans. And so really when I first started, I knew that this was a problem, but didn't necessarily recognize how much of a problem it really was. You kind of think that we're doing it and we're doing it well enough, but then when your grading and drainage complaints keep increasing, you start to realize that maybe we're not doing it well or at all. And so last year, we really did find that it was necessary to be sending a lot of these technical grading reviews to our city engineer to have our engineering firm verify these grading plans aren't going to negatively impact the neighbors and the communities. A lot of times in the new neighborhoods we're building, but it's not uncommon to have these drainage complaints on these littler lots around the lake as well. Those are really common complaint areas. So definitely we would recommend that until we would have in-house kind of technical engineering services, that we would continue to have those services conducted by the city engineer's office. So that does then get us to kind of some of those financial implications. We have two different types of ways that money gets involved. One are escrows. I think the council's been briefed on escrows. Think of that as the debit account. If we need to use the money, it's there. It's a security. A lot of times we're not using those funds, right? They're just there in case somebody doesn't do the work, but more often than not, they're just released back when the work is done completely. Currently, our escrows are for landscaping and erosion control, and it's $2,000. That would not cover the cost to rectify some of these drainage issues if we needed to. In new developments, our development agreements, the ones that you approve and enter into with developers, we require a $10,000 escrow. And that escrow is really broken out by grading, drainage, landscaping. We also talk about lot corners and the submittal of an as-built survey. What staff would recommend is that we move to kind of a model of a higher escrow, possibly still that $10,000, but it really covered the wide range of things, that we can use that to tap into a number of different things. Right now, if there was a new build in a residential subdivision, and let's say we've accepted the streets and the sidewalks, but the landscaper comes in, new home being built, and they chew up the curb. Right now, we don't have securities from those builders to go in and fix that. Those are just little ways that we need to maybe be protecting, again, the public's infrastructure, that neighborhoods look, all of those things, future homeowners. The other one is fees. In discussions with Bolton and Mink, we've talked about what would be the cost associated with their review of grading plans and as-built plans. And they have provided a quote for services that staff would recommend we embed into our fee schedule as a flat fee that's passed on to the applicant for new construction projects. It's a net neutral circumstance. For reference, last year, in about half the year of 2024, we sent 109 permits out to Bolton and Mink, and we spent over $24,000. And so those were costs that were coming out of the general fund. Right now, our permit fees, our building permit fees, aren't high enough to cover those additional engineering costs. So there's two different ways we can pay. Continue to pay as we do, or what staff would recommend is we do a pass-through cost to cover those fees. So again, tonight, seeking city council direction, and I've got some kind of pointed questions for you to at least start discussing and help provide some direction. So are you favorable with us moving forward to making necessary, relevant, and industry standard code and public works engineering changes?
So I guess we'll just take these one by one.
Makes sense, I think, yeah.
Yep, all right. Thoughts on the first?
I should note, all of this will come back before you, but the idea is you want us to kind of keep working to fix these systems. Some of the public works engineering standards would come back before you fairly routinely or quickly. You, about once a year, adopt updated engineering public works standards. Some of these codes amendments will be a little bit, they're just a little bit more nuanced. They might affect the zoning code. It might need to go to the planning commission with a public hearing before they come back to you. But I think the whole idea is, hey, council, we've identified some issues. Do you want us to kind of keep moving forward with trying to fix these issues?
Can you just, for public record, maybe a couple examples of some of these complaints? I mean, I think they're kind of obvious, but some examples that might say, okay, yeah, we need to address this. You talked about driveways and pools and like, so what kind of complaints are we getting and
a lot of the complaints we get right now, a lot of them aren't always like, some of it is just kind of what happens during development. So we're getting a lot of complaints in Hidden Creek. Well, so some of those complaints have to do, my neighbor's yard's finished, but that finished grade is higher than my grade, and so it's draining onto the property. Now, granted, once that gets finished out, there should be a drainage swale, but that drainage swale requirement is so low that the water is probably not going to move. So when it comes from public works and engineering standards, increasing that requirement to have a greater percentage drop would help move that water back some. Some of the complaints in the city code are the neighbors discharging their sump pump and it's coming across a property line. Our code does indicate you can't necessarily put your drainage onto other people's property, but when there is a drainage and utility easement on your property and your neighbor's property, that was the intent, and to be able to move that water is partly what needs to happen. So even though it's truly a black and white violation of the code, it's contradicting to the intent of an easement. So those are some of those areas that we need to fix. Some of the areas that we need to fix are the prescriptive things like our fees and our escrows all usually are a part of ordinance, and what we can use those fees and escrows for need to be codified, but they're not well codified right now.
So, Mr. Mayor, one of the things that happens is you have a brand new development, you have a master grading plan, right, that we all review and the engineer says looks good. And then each individual home comes in, and of course we don't build 1, 2, 3, 4 in an order. Whoever buys whatever lot gets built first. Guy in the middle comes, builds the lot, and our process, as Abby mentioned, we previously had a little trouble, reviewing that. So each builder will submit their plan, and it should match the master plan, right? It doesn't always, and that wasn't always getting caught, and part of that's just a skill set around the office. So we've got a better process working there. And then someone actually has to go out and check that they actually build this to what their plan and the master plan said, and sometimes that wasn't happening. And so the guy in the middle builds too high, and then the guy that's supposed to drain down here go, well, now I gotta get up to, and then there's a cascading effect, right? The complaints are generally new homeowners, brand new homeowners that they haven't settled their final check with the developer, and there's a soggy backyard or a soggy side yard where you can't even walk through without getting your shoes all wet because the grading is all terrible. And it's a tricky situation where how much does the city get involved between a homeowner and the builder? But at the same time, we have a global drainage issue that really lends itself to the city needing to be involved, because this guy in the middle caused a problem. How does the builder 2 houses down fix that problem if it's not the same builder especially? And you end up with these homeowners that are caught in the middle and expect the city to be able to facilitate a more orderly pattern of development. And as Abby mentioned in one of the first slides, was smaller lots are causing this. And if you've ever looked at a lot survey nowadays, they're shrinking so much that there's really hardly any room left on the lot for anything but drainage and utility easement. And the areas, what we're seeing is that people, back in the day when your lot was 150 feet behind your house and you had all sorts of backyard, you could avoid the easements, put your shed and your swing set and your fence in these places, maybe a little retaining wall, and not bother the general drainage pattern. Now there's no place in your backyard to put those things without being in the way of drainage. And so that is compounding things too. I know that, Abby, one of the things she wanted us to look at is how do we address fences in the right of way? I know Dave has weighed in too, just, are we gonna allow fences in drainage and utility easements? There's an argument to be made, no, you shouldn't, because a lot of times they impede the drainage, but at the same time, if you put a fence only in the area that wasn't drainage and utility easement, people would have these little postage stamp fenced in areas, and then you'd have all this weird area between homes that was outside of the fence and just wasted area, right? So, definitely a lot of this problem is just the size of lots has shrunk over the years, and we all know the reasons for that, the cost of building a home and all that kind of stuff. We're trying to keep that down, trying to keep the densities up. It's rearing its head here, so.
So, the first question then, any thoughts from council on this?
I got a question, how will this pertain to existing homeowners? You mentioned the idea of putting in a patio, I mean, other impervious things that could affect drainage. That's a very different scenario than a builder who's got his own engineer and the whole 9 yards. So what are these standards as we envision what that impact could be for that existing homeowner? What is that gonna look like for them as far as from just a burden of being able to add something? And follow-up question to that is, we've got a lot of new homes without decks on, with that board on the back just waiting for a deck. So with these, is that considered impervious surface? Would that trigger some sort of fees, studies, the whole 9 yards? What does that look like for those existing homeowners?
Sure, those are great questions, and it's still something that we're kind of wrestling through, especially with those attached appurtenances, so those attachments to homes, elevated decks where that ledger board is there, even if it's, just slightly off the ground and you kind of go down a step, those generally would not require any sort of additional grading review because they've been accounted for in that initial plan review, and more often than not aren't changing the grade in a way that's going to impact those adjacent property owners. Major additions to structures, certainly if we're starting to get major additions, new garages are a trigger often, and patios that get within a certain distance to a property line. That's really been that kind of those areas where we're really seeing a lot of the challenges is that we don't have maximum impervious surface requirements, and we don't have setback requirements for our impervious surfaces. So some of those complaints that we're getting right now are complaints based on paving to the edge of the property line. And so looking at some of those standards of when we would have them, we still haven't vetted through. But I would say our major additions, new larger accessory structures, not sheds or anything, and some of that impervious surface would incur probably that permit fee, not yet established, but what the hard cost would be was in the staff report.
$600 or $900.
I thought about 900, I think, or 750. I don't remember, somewhere in there. And then they would have to show a grading plan. Now that grading plan may not be that extensive if we've already got something on file. It's all going to be on a case-by-case property basis.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, thoughts?
Would that include like driveway, or I should say garage slabs and additional driveways?
It could, it just kind of depends, and that's still something we're trying to vet through. Honestly, this has been a project that I've been working on for a while, first looking at that analysis and then kind of like what are all the codes that would potentially need to be addressed. I've referred to it a lot as the octopus in the box. Every time we kind of open it up again, it's just more and more. I think what we'd be doing is kind of working in increments and bringing you some small steps along the way. Definitely that area of driveways is always can be a concern because more often than not, they're going right out into the public right-of-way, and they are filling drainage ditches, and so those are then just backing up the drainage for the adjacent properties. It's likely something as simple as a driveway, may not. I think our Public Works has been pretty good about knowing where there's grade issues and drainage issues already, but something that we'd have to consider.
Thank you.
So, let's say you have a homeowner that's DIY and it's gonna do it himself, he or herself. They, not only then they would have to hire an engineer or someone to provide this plan, this drainage plan, then they would also pay for the city to review that, correct?
That is correct. Now, that being said, I don't necessarily think that all projects need to have a professional engineer. I think with guidance from our engineer, we might be able to develop some standards, project-specific standards that could allow for a more rudimentary grading plan. I've worked in communities that don't require professional engineered surveys, but they do at least just want to know, how are you accommodating for your drainage? So all too often what's happening is people aren't, and they're just causing problems for their neighbors in their neighborhood.
Yeah, it's one thing for a developer to be able to do this, and they can get that cost back when they sell the lot or the house, but when you have a homeowner who's, you know, struggling to maybe even pay property taxes, and now we're requiring this, I agree, personally, I agree we need to do something, because it does create just havoc if it's, all these situations happen, but to thread that needle where it's just not getting cost prohibitive for them to be able to do anything, that's just a concern. So as we move forward,
Sure. So what I'm hearing is there's concern for the potential impact of the cost increase for projects, especially when it might be a smaller project, maybe landscape or patio improvements, those sorts of things. I think anytime we've maybe got new structures, I don't think that we could get away, we should be considering getting away from it. And, you know, major additions.
yeah, right.
Those are major
Different,
construction
yeah.
projects, but we definitely can keep that in mind as we're going forward, trying to really hit the big ones. Not hit the big ones, that's awful. But make sure we're addressing the projects that could have some of the bigger impacts. So,
Any other thoughts on this first?
kind of keep moving forward, but
Yep.
keep those things in
Yep.
mind. Okay? So the next one, do you agree that until such time as we have some in-house technical engineering services, we utilize consulting services for grading and as-built plan review?
Yeah, I guess the note I made to myself on that one is, in our staffing plan, do we see hiring somebody with that skill set in the near term, or is that a longer play?
I think it's a little longer play. You know, I think an engineering tech was a part of our staff at one point in time. You know, if we see that the development pattern is heading in that direction where we can support that staff member, I think it might make sense. Sometimes it's a bit of a tough jumping off point to hiring an engineering tech without some support staff around you. That person might need specialized software and equipment, and quite frankly, this is a pretty good spot for a consulting firm, you know, to step in and provide those services at what might seem like a big number, but when you look at the overhead that it might cost to get that first person on the engineering staff, I think maybe a little bit longer term plan is when we even look at maybe a staff engineer when we're at 25,000 plus, you know, someday. I think it depends on some skill sets too, right? I mean, if you could hire a public works person that wants to pick up a shovel and also has some of that skill set, you know, maybe that could be a dual role type thing. But it can be a tough thing to just have someone who's all alone on an island as the only sort of engineering professional in a group, so.
One other thing some cities do, and I'm not necessarily advocating for this, but an option could be, we have a quote from Bolton and Mink. I would recommend if the council is comfortable using consulting services that we adopt that fee and we utilize that practice to send things out. But maybe on an annual or every other year or something basis, we look to see if there's other firms that might be able to partner at a lower cost for the residents. It's an option. I don't know what that really does with our contract with Bolton and Mink, but we could always look, you know, towards the end of the year to see if there's other firms that could potentially provide it for less.
I think that's key there. Love what Bolton Mink does for us, but to diversify a little bit and get some bids on that might be a good move, to at least look at that. And I think you'd mentioned, and I, just talking to, but we had a previous staff member that was doing some of these, and this is where we got into some of these situations. Maybe they weren't being done properly, or that didn't have the skill set. So I think that's important to have the right person, at the switch doing this. And so if that sounds like that's a third party.
I mean, I often hear from engineers, it's an easy one to learn, but it's also when you do have such a high amount of complaints, when you do have that many concerns in a neighborhood, when you're really trying to build new neighborhoods for the long-term preservation, I think that it's worth those costs to be having professionals take care of it. If it's those one-offs, every now and then, maybe it's not a big deal, and maybe in time we can teach people those skills. But I think right now, where we're at, I don't think that we should be trying to do in-house services.
I've had a lot of experience. This is not unique to Forest Lake. We had the exact same problems in Centerville, had the exact same problems in every community I worked for the 20 years previous to that as a consultant. I will tell you that you'll hear a lot from builders. You'll get phone calls from builders. Well, I can't believe you're gonna charge this or that. The builders that do it right get their money back right away. And to me, increasing the escrow is the way to go. Keeping the fee as low as we can, it makes sense to me, because it rewards good developers and good builders that wanna do it the right way first time, pay attention to the grading. A lot of times grading is an afterthought. Builders are in the business of building the structure, right? They got carpenters and plumbers, and the landscaper is the last thing they worry about. And some are good and some don't pay attention at all, right? And the builders who pay attention get approval right away and are on with their lives, and everything's hunky-dory. The ones that don't, it's a struggle.
So that jumps ahead just a little bit, going back to the third party. Is everyone in favor of that?
I do want to ask the question, would you like us to seek other bids before we bring that back to you? Are you comfortable with us bringing back a fee schedule, getting that kind of established in place for the construction season? Then maybe as the construction season winds down, we look to see what kind of costs we can save in subsequent years? You're okay with that approach?
I think with the time of the
Thank you.
year we're in, it makes most sense.
Yeah, thank you. So then escrow increases, as a reminder, currently, the code is limited in what we're using our escrows for, and it is for $2,000. The question of increasing it, and if you're comfortable increasing it to $10,000. That is what we would require right now in a new development. But as Mark had said, those are often the builders that are getting it done and getting their money back and moving on quick.
The escrow, is it just for the new builds then? Is that what we're talking about?
We could definitely escrow for, break out the escrow for a new construction versus a remodel project. New construction has a greater chance of us not getting necessarily as-built survey and the property pins put back in place, and there's probably more potential for damage to the public infrastructure than maybe just a average homeowner remodel. I still would recommend we increase those average homeowner remodels, because when they go south, $2,000 isn't generally enough. Now granted, we also do have an enforcement program, and we do have different tools to try to use before using escrows, but.
I think that one of the differences too is homeowner that has a remodel or a big addition, as Abby mentioned, we have other tools, right? You can correct it through the nuisance ordinances and assess it to the property. If you have a builder that does that, you can still do that, but now you're putting it on that homeowner, and that homeowner's not gonna be happy with the city sort of ignoring who caused the problem and just putting it on the property, and then putting the owner in a position to have to sue the builder to get that money back. If if it really is the builder that's causing the problem. And as you know, 2,000 just isn't enough to do anything these days. And I mean, when you talk about sod, damage to curb and sidewalk, not having the proper trees planted, property pins, grading as built, drainage issues, all sorts of things that can go awry. I mean, we heard from the watershed the other day, I think, just about how important it is for black dirt to be put down. Oftentimes, we're not out there 24/7 watching, and you get ready for the sod to be put down, and you're expecting first black dirt, then sod. There'll be many a times, maybe it's just a thin layer of black dirt or none at all, and the sod is right on the clay. And, you're left to tell the homeowner, good luck, right, if you don't have that escrow. And this is meant to protect your brand new homeowners, people who are just moving into town, right? These are people who are scraping by to make that payment on that first house of theirs, and for a $400,000 or $500,000 house, a builder will walk away from $2,000 and just say good luck. And of course, it's not the builders that are here all the time, because they wanna maintain a relationship, but I know it's hard to think about sometimes, but there are builders every day that just go out of business or almost go out of business, and again, I've dealt with a number of them in previous communities, and it just happens way more often than you wanna think, that builders either go belly up or just get way behind on stuff and can't keep up and just stop having to care about that kind of stuff, so.
Yeah, so I'm definitely in favor of that increased escrow, especially for those builders, those new homes. Again, I just want us to be mindful of, that neighbor that's been in the house for 20 years and they're putting on an addition, to come up with a bigger escrow,
I can
could be
understand that.
burdensome for them.
I can understand that. We can look to see what are maybe some reasonable securities. Again, escrows are that, while it is that debit account that we could use, the intent is the security for them to do the work. That's the goal more than anything. It's do the work, you get your money back. Mark is right. The amount of escrows that we still have, not necessarily because people haven't requested them, but because the builders walked away, is very high. Because $2,000 to them is nothing compared to just being done with that homeowner and moving on.
So how are we using that money?
Pardon?
How are we using that money if they've walked away?
Right now, it's just sitting there, we have to rectify it at some point, but
Yeah, I mean, it technically, there's, probably a legal time period in which it's forfeit, and then there's probably, there's legal processes for actually the forfeiture of property, or that's a whole different conversation.
usually what happens is we find some dead time in the winter and go, you know what, let's try to clean up all the 2022s that we still got sitting out there. And you go through and write people letters saying, if you don't call us back, we're keeping your money, generally we're trying to give it back to them, at some point. We try to clean that up once in a while. It's not as, it's a tough one, because they linger and they linger and they linger,
Yeah, and a lot of times it's not that homeowner, right? It's that
Right.
original applicant,
Oh,
it's
no,
that
for
original
sure.
builder, and so,
Yeah.
And so we have to release that escrow. We can't give that escrow back to the homeowner, because they didn't write us the check. We need to give it back to the person that wrote us the check, right?
So, recently I had a developer reach out complaining maybe that we were asking too much. He shared with me some comparable cities. I shared that with you,
I mean, the data that was given there,
was not maybe
I get so frustrated, because builders do this all the time. Well, my building permit in such and such city only cost me $11,000. But they forget, well, it didn't include this and it didn't include that. That data that was there was apples, oranges, bananas, and pears. I mean, there was so much differential in what it maybe included and what it didn't. I actually worked at my last city too, to revise our building permit because it used to mix fees and escrows, and you get one number on the bottom, and it was a big number, and builders complained about that a lot. And so we made a different permit, and we put fees on one side and escrows on the other, so that they could still write us one check, but there was a clear differential between what we're charging for fees and that you will not get back, and here's the chunk of money, which is a much bigger chunk of money, that you will get back if you do the project correctly and on time, and I think it's important for us to make that distinction to builders, is that we're happy to talk about keeping our fees as low as possible. We all want that. Keeping fees low helps people get into an affordable house. Keeping escrows high actually helps us keep fees low, to me, because we don't have to play the game of winning some and losing some. You know, we can be nice and tight on our margins on the fees so that we're not making money. But with the escrows, you've gotta win every time. You can't afford to lose. The city should not be, the rest of the citizens in the town should not be paying for a irresponsible builder, right? So I think that escrow part needs to be high, and we can stay tight on the fees as long as we can, but the escrows really need to be there.
When we come back, we certainly can show you some of the comparable cities too, to show you kind of where we are in a range of things.
Yeah, that would be great, as long as we're not an outlier, you know, either way. I'm more comfortable with increasing these fees.
And then I think you already kind of inadvertently addressed that line item for the fee schedule to cover those third-party costs for that grading plan and as-built review. And I heard you say you're comfortable with us using Bolton and Minks quota fees, but when it slows down and looking at 26 fee schedule, start to see if there's other firms that might be able to do this work at a lower cost for us. So that I have enough direction, at least right now. Is there any, final thoughts the council may have as we continue to embark on this? I will say we started this process last summer. It was a kind of work on it through the winter. I don't have a ton of free time right now to be working on code stuff, but that's why I think I wanted to have this discussion, big, holistic. We'll start bringing stuff back to you that's timely and appropriate. So our whole hope to have this done, my hope to have this done before this construction year, but I think we can get small bits kind of coming at you so that we're staying ahead of it through this construction year.
Yeah, and to the point that Mark made on that schedule, if the more that, because people see that big number and that's what they hear, they're complaining, the city, it's X amount, just get it, but if that can be just as transparent and laid out openly as possible, I think it's gonna help communicate why they need to be what they are, so.
For sure. We definitely can do some better handout materials too at our front counter on what are escrows and why we need them and what they're used for, and that you get them back when you do a good job. So, yeah, for sure. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 8B, Administrator's Report.
Mr. Mayor and Council, one of the handouts in front of you is just our sort of first run at a more robust Friday update, titled it the Administrator's Report for lack of a better title right now, but this is something I wanted to put in front of you and get your thoughts on. I don't expect you to go through all 11 pages right now, but please over the next few days and at your leisure, just take a look at it and give us some feedback on whether or not this is this an appropriate format for a bi-weekly update? We were thinking we might put this in the packet. I will say, as we compiled this was a bit of a heavy lift. This is a lot of information, and whether or not we can do this every 2 weeks is a bit of a question outstanding. I'd like to give it a go and see if we can do it, but this is also, as I mentioned, it's a lot of information to keep up to date. That being said, this is all information the public should have at their disposal, right? And there's a balance between literally putting everything that we do on a daily basis and every decision we make into a report and not having enough information for the public. And I don't know, I'm trying to find where that line is. And I think there's a balance there that I'm trying to find with, same thing with not just the public, but you guys as well. Just how much information can you even take in? And how much should we just be going about our duties and doing our thing, and then if you got a question, we'll answer it, right? Maybe I'm answering too many questions that aren't being answered here, I don't know. So we would appreciate your feedback on whether or not this is great, and whatever it takes, let's get this done, to, nah, this is probably a bit more than we need. So this is kind of a first blush at it, and forgive the probably a little typo and format type stuff we're working through a little bit, but this is something I wanted to put in front of you as a enhanced communication. And again, what we're kind of moving towards too is just a more strategic thought around communications, and both external and internal. How much do we do on social media, keeping our website up to date? Last time I told you about how we're doing some more timely website auditing to make sure that that information's correct and timely. You know, at some point, do we value this enough that we have a half a staff person dedicated to social media, website, newsletter type stuff? As Jolene, I think, has talked to you about before, we'd like to get a newsletter put together. That's something very, very common with cities, and we're not doing that right now in terms of putting out an actual newsletter. We are putting out that email blast that Jolene puts together. So we have all these different platforms, and the question is, how do we manage our time putting information on all those places and in the various formats and in a timely fashion that makes sense? And it's a tough thing to wrap your head around, how much is too much and how much is not enough. So any feedback you give me would be great, and I'll leave it at that.
Any initial thoughts?
A lot of information, it's good though.
Yeah, initial thought, I think it's put together very well. I think it's gonna be excellent for just not only building awareness of all that's going on in the city, which I think is underknown, think about that, but also just building that community identity, which is helpful. One thing I do miss is a Friday email that I think is internal focused, and just some of the celebrations that are called out in there around, staff's anniversaries and whatnot. So maybe a combination of the two, some format.
Yeah, I think this is great, but I do realize it takes a lot of time to put this together, so, that balance of getting as much information without just consuming a bunch of staff time.
Every hour we're doing this is an hour we're not doing
Yeah,
something
right,
else.
right, so striking that balance is important, but this is really, it's good, and if we can get to, and when we do get to a full newsletter can go out to the public, I think that's ideal, for sure.
I agree.
That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thanks.
Actually, I'm sorry, I should note, since the last meeting, I did head down to the Capitol and gave some testimony on a House bill that Congresswoman Anderson was helping us put forward for money, state appropriation for the CASA 32 11th Avenue project and the Forest Road realignment. And so that was presented in front of a committee, and we've got a week and a half or something like that until we find out what's in the omnibus bill, and some late night we'll get word that it was either in there or not. And I really can't predict whether or not we'll get that money or not, but we did put that forward, and thank you to Representative Anderson for helping us with that.
Is there anything that council can do to help that, do you think, at all, or that opportunity, or that?
It's one of those things where you kind of got to pick your battles on how often you're contacting your congresspeople, and certainly Representative Anderson is already aware, she's the one putting it forward, and you could email the committee members on that appropriations committee, but as you can imagine, they're so busy right now, I don't know that they're really going to get to your email before the session closes. But
Yeah, and I think I asked you this, since we have, Forest Lake is split by 2 districts, even though Representative Hill's not in that part of his district is not where this project is, does it help to reach out to him?
yeah, I think it's always good to have community voices. I mean, if certainly Representative Hill also is a representative of Forest Lake, right? And I think the people on that committee want to know that the representatives of Forest Lake are in support of this project, and so certainly, he might be a key member to reach out to if you're going to do that.
Good. So number 9, mayor and city council updates. I see that we don't really have staff updates. Is that moving forward going to be the kind of the plan, or?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that was in light of the incredibly robust administrator's report. We kind of moved that off of this agenda. This is going to kind of be a work in progress, and we'll feel it out as we go. But I guess I would encourage council, after your first glance, if you have questions for staff based on that, now would be a time to ask. Otherwise, follow up with staff by email as well.
Okay, great. All right, Councilmember Larson, do you have anything for us tonight?
As noted in the administrator's report on Friday the 9th, myself and Commissioner Gerard from the Planning Commission interviewed a gentleman for open position on the Planning Commission, and currently we're just doing some more background on that, and hopefully we'll bring something forward to the council for a vote.
Great. Councilmember Erickson.
Yeah, last Friday morning, I had a chance to attend a roundtable discussion with some of the local business leaders in Forest Lake, as well as Representative Pete Stauber. He was soliciting feedback on just the business community and the tax law that's scheduled to sunset this year. So it was a great interaction, not only with our business community, but also Representative Stauber and his staff.
Great. Councilmember Miller.
I have nothing this week.
Councilmember Valento.
Nothing for me.
I don't really have anything. Everyone received an email from Jolene, just being mindful. We're going to have an addition to the council here, family, eventually. And so with Councilmember Valento being gone for a period of time, just be mindful if you're not going to be able to make it, to let Jolene know. And so we make sure we have a quorum. So, okay, with that, we have a closed session this evening. Would someone like to make a motion to put us into closed session?
Sure. Make a motion that pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D05 Subdivision 3B for confidential attorney-client discussion regarding active litigation in the matter of City of Forest Lake versus Jonathan E. Strom and Celine Finance LP, court file number 82CV252807.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are in closed session. We will stop videoing the live feed, recorded feed this evening. We will be coming back to council chambers after our closed session to simply close this meeting.